welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to help trauma therapists be their incredible selves, to be human, to be real, not just a clinician. I'm a big believer in who we are is more important than what we know, and this requires cultivating authenticity, genuineness, and vulnerability, and that requires intention. You can learn more about my courses and workshops by going to thetraumatherapistproject.com. That's thetraumatherapistproject.com. Let's get started. All right, here we go. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the podcast. Very excited to have as my guest today, Vernon Baumrind. Vernon, welcome.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
You're welcome. So Vernon is a father of 2 adult children and the grandfather of 4, living in Charlotte, North Carolina. He's the author of the book, Deceit. Deceit is a story of a loving father facing formidable legal odds to secure custody of his 2 small children using wiretap technology. He turns the tide in his favor in the case of a cheating wife and a manipulative gynecologist, a lifelong sexual predator with power and authority whose vile exploits have devastating effects on everyone in his sphere. These events happened 45 years ago, but due to the indecent content of the wiretap recordings, the explicit details of the story were kept under wraps, largely because of the tender ages of the 2 children involved, the content of which would have been detrimental to their formative years. Vernon, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you, Dr.
You're welcome. So before we go in here, share with our listeners, Vernon, where you're from originally and where you are currently.
Well, I'm from Marion, South Carolina, a small town in South Carolina, about 120 miles. It would be southeast of Charlotte, North Carolina, not too far from Myrtle Beach. So I grew up there.
Okay.
But I've been in Charlotte since 1985.
Okay. All right, Vernon, let's dive in here. What the hell happened? This sounds intense and just mind-boggling.
Right. It was very intense. It was a very traumatic experience. And it's one that, whether you think you can get beyond just something at some point during your lifetime, you're wrong. It never goes away. There's always a lingering pain from the events that happened in my instance. The wonderful thing is the two young children in this story turned out extraordinarily well. And for that, I'm very grateful. So as far as what happened, it came to me as a total surprise. I was totally unsuspecting. I began to have, I noticed that my wife had become cold, calloused, indifferent, distant. This would have been in the fall of 1978. And
you've been married? You were married?
We had been married 11 years.
Okay.
11 and a half years to that point.
Wow.
The children were 4 and 2 years of age. My wife was, her gynecologist was this gynecologist. I won't use his name. Although all of the name is well known throughout the litigations and the cases that took place. He actually delivered the second child, not the first. He was a junior, I guess, an underling, a new fledgling physician at the time our first child was born. But when it was time for the second child, when that time came around, he actually stepped in and was the delivering doctor and was the doctor that she continued with afterwards. Very shortly after that time, he and his wife and his 2 children moved into the same neighborhood as we were in, which was in Florence, South Carolina, not too far from where I grew up. So they were neighbors 3 doors down and across the street. And we were casual friends to begin with. I was, because she, knew him well, of course. They began to, we did go out several times socially, went to a movie. went out to eat several times. And then they started going on nightly walks in the neighborhood. Not every evening, but 3 or 4 times, or 2 or 3 times, I guess, a week. And I didn't go along because our children were 4 and 2, and someone needed to stay home with the children. And that may have been where the relationship got started. The relationship got started. Of course, it got started in his office, but this was, a further point of contact with these nightly walks. And this sort of went on for a couple of months, and that's when I began to feel this distance from her. And it got intense enough that I suggested that we get marriage counseling, which she wouldn't do it initially. Eventually, she agreed to go. We went, I think it was twice together. And of course, the marriage counselor met with us separately. And then I think on the probably that second meeting with him, he suggested to me that I seek legal assistance, that there was no reason for us to continue.
Okay.
That she didn't have an interest in continuing, but I still didn't know about the relationship. I was.
Well, you knew about the nightly walks.
I knew about the nightly walks, right?
Okay. I mean, you must have been suspecting something.
No, I didn't suspect him. I didn't expect what was occurring. No,
okay.
I just knew there was something wrong.
Okay.
And I guess that went on. I was a little oblivious, of course. Okay. Very much in love with her. Told the counselor that I was in love with her when I was asked. And apparently she was honest with him about the relationship. Okay. It wasn't but probably a day or two after the last meeting with the counselor that she announced that she didn't love me any longer and she wanted us to separate, but it was Christmas time and she didn't want to disrupt the children's Christmas season and asked me to move into the empty bedroom upstairs in the house, which I did. But of course, there was some conversation about, what's happened here. Mm-hmm. She basically wouldn't discuss it with me. And again, I was oblivious. But I think it was maybe the next day, I'm cogitating all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And the next day is a Wednesday. And she had several weeks before this had asked me if I would come home early from work and keep the children for her, babysit for her so she could go out shopping on Wednesday afternoon. So on this Wednesday, I think it was December the 6th, I'm pushing the children in the swings in the backyard. I'm with them all afternoon. I'm pushing them in the swings in the backyard. I'm just miserable. She's refused to go back to marriage counseling. I know that she doesn't love me anymore, that probably after New Year's, I'm going to be booted out of the house. I'm going to lose my children. I'd already lost her. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to lose my children. Well, my children were nothing more important to me than her and my children.
Okay. If I may, why are you thinking at that time you're going to lose your children and you're going to be booted out of the house, as opposed to thinking, or maybe we can get 50-50 custody? Or why was that your go-to thinking?
Well, I think I was naive enough not to be aware of what was happening, earlier on, but I wasn't naive enough to think that this was going to be anything more than a tragedy by way of her getting a divorce, keeping the children, and then together with this doctor, which of course he would have to get a divorce as well, which ultimately is what happened. Is so I'm not going to put anything at that point. I'm not putting anything at chance.
Yep.
I'm thinking, well, actually, what happened? I'm swinging the children in the swings. I'm pushing them in the swings, and all of a sudden, it's like the pieces of the puzzle come together for me. It's like somebody handed me a note or whispered it in my ear. And I knew exactly what's going on. I don't know why, it was just all of a sudden, but everything came together. And I knew that his office was closed on Wednesday afternoons. So I put the children in the car and drove to his office.
Whoa.
This was late Wednesday afternoon, December 6th. So, the sky's darkening. This is like 4:45 in the afternoon. We pull into the Holiday Inn. This is in downtown Florence, which is right behind his office building. And we didn't wait very long. I've got two little children in the back seat and, car seats. And here's their mother coming down the fire escape at the back of his building. And because I watch her go to her car and drive off. And I'm thinking, at a time like that, you're thinking everything within the whole spectrum of human emotions, from self-pity to being angry and wanting to resort to violence. But I realized my children are at stake here, and I've lost her. And this might answer your earlier question. Why would I not think about shared custody? I could tell from her demeanor and the way she was treating me that was not in the cards.
Got it.
It was going to be everything in her favor. And so I realized that I've got to control my emotions. I've got to contain my impulse, my worst impulses, and I got to be smart about this. I've got to beat them at this thing. And that's what I determined. And so I knew I would have to get home before her, because otherwise she'd come home and where are we? And I knew that she would probably go out shopping, you go buy a few groceries as her excuse.
Right.
Which is exactly what happened. But the children and I got home prior to her getting home, and she comes in with one little bag of groceries, and we were going to put the Christmas tree up that night, and that was sort of a traumatic situation too, with all these revelations. And of course, I'm having to contain myself, which I did. I just determined that, and I didn't know what was ahead at this point, but there was a lot that unraveled. I knew about the relationship then. I wanted to know what they were talking about. I remembered now that there are times I'd come home and she'd be quickly hanging up the telephone. So, the pieces of that puzzle came together. And
why, if I may interrupt for a second, why didn't you just confront her and say, yeah?
Okay, good question. And I've had that question posed many times. Because then the husband, almost anywhere in the country, but especially in South Carolina, men didn't get custody back in the 1980s, late 80s. That was just unheard of unless the woman was alcoholic, hardened criminal, abuse, and she was none of those. Okay. So I knew that this was going to be an all-out battle, and it was. And so
the purpose of the wiretapping was what? To catch her, or to help you get custody? Let's talk about that.
Yes. Well, initially, the purpose of the wiretap was to find out what they were saying. How involved was she? How determined was she? What was going on? What was the plan? Where was this going? And so I secured what I needed to tap our telephone. We only had one phone, and of course, this was in 1979. There were no cell phones, so
Right.
there was a telephone in the house. And so what I did is I bought an extension phone and the wiretapping device that I needed. I went to an electronic store.
Radio Shack or something.
Well,
Something like that.
eventually people began to use this case because I won eventually in the courts, and I was vindicated from the charges of wiretapping. And a lot of people started going to Radio Shack and buying little devices to tap their telephone. And eventually the government stepped in and they reversed the case, my case was a precedent-setting case that attorneys began to use all over the country to justify wiretapping for their clients.
Right.
And the government said, wait a minute now. No, y'all can't do this. You all, I'm Southerner. You all can't do this. This man what he did was ruled to be legal because the wiretap was installed on a telephone within the confines of his home. It was on wires within the confines of his home. It was his only means of defense. And in fact, the doctor in this case was not entitled to privacy within the confines of his home. So they ruled in my favor. It went all the way to the federal Supreme Court.
Okay.
Through what's called a writ of certiorari. The lower court ruled in my favor. And the doctor and his attorneys kept appealing. And eventually they appealed to the federal Supreme Court through a writ of certiorari, which the federal Supreme Court refused to hear. They remanded it back to the state and we went to trial.
So you start tapping the phone, and again, the purpose is to find out what's going on. Are you thinking I'm going to need a defense to help get my kids, or what's the thought process going on here?
Well, it was the objective.
Okay.
I'm going to fight with everything I've got to get custody of my children. I felt I was the better parent. That was proven to be the case. That's what the judge decided. I raised the children on my own. They're in their mid-40s at this. In fact, my oldest child just turned 50.
Oh, boy.
And they have children themselves at this point. So everything turned out ultimately, but of course, very traumatic all the way through.
I mean, it sounds so. You're wired. What did you find out during these wiretaps?
Well, I've actually placed all of the essential conversations from that wiretap in this book.
Wow.
And the material's very salacious. The first thing that I hear when the results of the wiretap because I had been relegated to this room upstairs. I had a little privacy there. And so I was able to install this wiretap in the closet of the room to which I had been relegated, because I concealed it where it wouldn't be found. And so the first day's conversation I listened to that night after he get off the phone that evening. And the first thing I hear is, hello, where's Doohickey? The doctor asked her, where is Doohickey? And from there, very quickly from there, this man has been, because he's as old as I am, at this, we're both 79. But he had been addicted or pornography was his problem, and he had become perverted with it. And their conversation immediately went to sex.
Okay.
If he was out of the house, if he wasn't there, I could come over and check you out. And it just went downhill very, very quickly, and all the conversations were riffed with sexual innuendos, not only just innuendos, but graphic discussions.
Right.
And this is exactly why I wrote the book, was because this doctor's behavior persists today in others who follow the same path that he did. And I think it's important for to be able to see how this unscrupulous professional operated, and to understand how the tragedy that resulted from his conduct was possible.
Mm-hmm.
But he was very manipulative throughout. For about 25 days, I had the wiretap intact. So it was capturing every conversation.
At any point, did you confront your wife at that time with this?
I did not. No, I did not. But I couldn't confront her. That was something I wanted to do that, but I couldn't, because once you do that, the cat's out of the bag. Now she's got the upper hand. She can, she can take the action.
Right. So how does it unfold at what point after you get these recordings, what do you do with them? How does the story unfold?
Well, after I installed the wiretap, I hired detectives, private detectives, who were on them full time throughout December 1979. And I hired an attorney, a domestic attorney, who was outstanding. And so we remained quiet as I could, as difficult as that was, for the balance of the month. Went through Christmas, and all these things happened that are in this book. There were some very interesting things that occurred. They met many times. All of it was documented on January. I think it was December the 31st. I called my attorney and I said, I can't contain myself any longer. I'm just about to explode. And he said, you don't have to. We have enough. And
enough to what?
Enough evidence. He said, we're going to file suit for divorce and custody of the children on Tuesday, which was January 2nd, 1979. And we filed suit against the doctor for alienation of affections, criminal conversation, which is old English law for intimacy with the spouse of another, and malpractice. When this went to court, the the circuit court judge ruled that malpractice is the result of a negligent act. And this was not a negligent act. This was a outrageous act, a willful, outrageous act. So he supplanted the third segment of the lawsuit with outrage. And so we went through litigation on that basis.
Was there, I just went through a divorce a year ago, just a year ago. You must have been thinking, or were you thinking, I don't want to presume, about, well, if I take the kids, I'm taking them away from their mom. What was your thought process around that?
It was very painful. I knew how devastating that would be to her. But there were, she was so over the hill with this guy that he was more important. He became more important than her children. And the family court judge pointed that out.
Mm-hmm.
That I had become a surrogate mother during the month of, really leading up to it, the month of November and December. I was with the children all the time, and she was out doing her thing. And also in the conversations in the wiretap, there were some comments that were made, what if you lose he asked the children, what if you lose the children? This was kind of late in the process, late December, and they're beginning to get a sense that who are these people following us, and we got to be careful what we say. And
they thought people were following them?
well, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me ask you something, Vernon.
Sure.
We've talked about the story. The book is called Deceit. Sounds incredible. How did you deal? We haven't really talked about how you dealt with this. I mean, this sounds friggin' traumatic.
Yeah.
How did you manage? Did you have friends you talked to? Did you see it there? What did you do? How did you manage this?
Really hard to explain. I think I was able to handle it because I was so convinced that she was not going to reverse herself, and there was no way for me, no direction for me to go, but to think of just me and my children.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't necessarily harden me. Where, in fact, you'd be surprised to see in this story, it's in the book, the attempts that I made to get her to reverse herself without revealing to her what I knew. There was some measures that I took to show that I loved her, but I wasn't letting on that I knew what the issue was, because if I did that, she could sort of take control of the situation and then and could take me to court. And we weren't we didn't have enough evidence yet. I had to wait until the end of December. I had to wait 25 days for my attorney to tell me we have enough evidence that he was confident that we would succeed in court. And so it was like I was holding my breath the whole month, not knowing for a fact that I was going to get custody of the children. And I was really determined to get custody of the children because this doctor was a pervert. And he did, as you learn in the book, he did this with a lot of women. And eventually his license was suspended.
Oh, wow.
When it was all over and we got through all the litigations, I actually furnished 11 witnesses to women who had contacted me. All this was in the newspapers. The story aired on 2020, ABC's 2020 in 1985.
Oh, wow.
It was moderated by Barbara Walters and Hugh Downs. They did a little story on it. And I began to get calls from all over the country from people wanting to write the story at that time. And my attorney said, Vernon, you had better write the story and copyright it, or it might be your story, but somebody else is going to do that and they'll own it. So I did that. I actually get together a 484-page manuscript that I copyrighted, and I sat on it all these years because of the content of those conversations.
45 years.
45 years.
Why 45 years?
Well, I certainly needed to, wait until the children were well beyond that. And I think, probably 20 years ago, I probably could have written this story, but I was busy making a living, getting over the 5 attempts to regain custody. The two of them married.
Oh, wow.
They initiated attempts to regain custody 5 times. Every time that would happen, I'm looking at another $35,000 to $50,000, $60,000.
What?
Yeah, so it kept me broke all these years.
Oh my God!
And then too, I was always a little worried about the content of the wiretapping, and so I was really concerned how that would even affect my adult children.
Sure.
And so, why tell this story now? I have people say, well, why are you telling this story now? Why didn't you tell it earlier? Well, I'm nearly 80 years of age, and as indicated in the book, for me to take this story to my grave would be derelict. It'd be irresponsible, and it'd be an injustice to my fellow man. I've waited too long for many people to be able to benefit, by my having postponed the telling of the story. And
How so? What is your feeling on that? Why tell the story?
Because people need to see how people behave and how detrimental it can be. This doctor was controlling, he was domineering, he was manipulative, he had an attitude of entitlement. The most powerful element at play in this story was his overpowering influence, which he used to advantage himself. As I've already suggested, he had a compulsion for pornography. This was revealed by patients and former employees. He used his power to leverage himself with females for the purposes of having nothing to do with the reasons a woman visits her gynecologist.
Right.
He preyed on unsuspecting and vulnerable women, exploiting his status as a doctor in a highly unethical fashion. All of this was corroborated by witnesses, witness testimony by the medical board. Eventually, when I filed a complaint, all of it's been in the newspapers. People need to know this sort of thing happens. He needed to be exposed for his behavior.
Sure.
And there are others that do this even to this day.
Right.
And so,
it's just, as we kind of wind down here, Vernon, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah.
Okay. Good. To make it short and sweet. Yeah.
Got through
wow.
the years.
The name of the book is Deceit. How do people learn about this? How do people learn about you, Vernon? What's the best way?
They can actually, you can Google deceitthebook.com, deceitthebook.com. It'll take you right to, the website for the book. Go on that website and there's a button there that you can click. If you are interested in acquiring the book, you can get an ebook for $5.95. I think the paperback book is probably $12.95, and Amazon will mail that to you. But yeah, you go on the website, there's a button there that you can click that will take you directly to the book on Amazon.
Okay. We'll have that linked up here at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. Vernon, appreciate you being on here and sharing this and sharing your story and opening up about it. It is just so intense and, as you said, traumatic.
Right.
But I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're on here, and looking forward to getting this book out, helping to get this book out there for you.
Well, thank you. There are a lot of lessons to be learned in this book. This book is just full of life's lessons. Things like, controlling your impulses, containing your worst inclinations to be violent.
Right.
Give the situation an opportunity to either work itself out or to protect yourself, which is what I did.
All right. Well, all right. All right, Vernon, thank you so much. We'll be in touch.
Sure.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.